I am an engineer by training, and I am a researcher who's very interested in pregnancy. And pregnancy is a fascinating topic because most people don't think about it. They think it must work most of the time, and you expect that if you are successfully managed to get pregnant, that you will have a healthy baby. Unfortunately, 10% of babies are born prior to full gestation, and maternal mortality in the Western world has actually been increasing. And in fact, if you're a Black woman in America, the statistics are appallingly even worse. And this was put into stark relief with COVID in the last couple of years, as we saw that vaccines were not tested on pregnant women. And this left especially pregnant healthcare workers in a difficult position as to how it was that they could make decisions about whether to become vaccinated. So what am I as an engineer trying to do about this and trying to understand about pregnancy? Well, I'm focusing on the extra embryonic fetal tissues. So a big mouthful, but basically once you have the start of pregnancy, a cell, a fertilized egg from a sperm, it divides. The very first division basically separates out the cells into two parts, ones that are going to become the baby and the ones that are going to become the support system for the baby. And that's what I'm studying. So the placenta and the fetal membranes, and these are therefore the tissues that are more likely to be experiencing the forces and the motions and the things that an engineer would study. So in fact, I have three examples here of just different parts of pregnancy that we've been looking at using engineering approaches. So in the first case, we're looking at microfluidic devices, so an organ on a chip. And we're considering the early development of the placenta. So those extra embryonic trophoblast cells we put into a hydrogel, a biomaterial inside this microfluidic device, and study how those cells move in response to cues from the environment. So the two graphs on the right show a chemical gradient on the top and a control on the bottom. And as you can see, we track each individual cell and the cells move around with respect to the chemical gradient. And if there's no gradient, then they basically move around in a random way. And so by doing this, we're trying to understand how the cells respond to the chemical cues, but also things like the stiffness of the matrix. We then think about this in terms of how that early development of the placenta can influence the later development of the placenta. And here we take full-term third trimester healthy placenta tissue and we image it. And we image it in such a way that we can see the capillaries, we can see the tissue, and we can see the interface between the mom and the baby. And we can do computational multiphysics models of blood flow and oxygen diffusion to see how the structure of the tissue in the placenta that actually formed influences the transport from the mother to the baby. And we can look at things like fetal growth restriction when the baby doesn't get enough from the mother. Thirdly, we can study premature birth specifically by looking at the fracture of the amniotic sac or the fetal membranes. This is colloquially called the breaking of waters. It's what happens when the membrane ruptures. And this happens prior to full-term birth in a shocking amount of times for no apparent reason. And this is a classic engineering problem because this is forces and deformations. And so we're in fact using fracture mechanics approaches to try to understand this. And in fact, using simple models to understand why, for example, here in North Carolina, where we have a lot of hurricanes, the extreme pressures that you get due to the atmosphere in weather events can in fact be seen in a higher rate of premature birth. So with all of these different approaches, we're trying to show that our research is complementary to the more traditional approaches of biology. We're not trying to take over from the developmental biologists, but just to add a piece to it from an engineering perspective. I've thrown up on this slide a couple of different examples in addition to the ones that I've discussed. And I also just want to mention that we published a special journal issue last year about this, and me and a colleague are also in the process of writing a book on this. And hopefully getting more people excited about this idea of using engineering approaches to study human pregnancy. Thanks.